am thankful that my kiddos want to be here. I'm thankful for all the kiddos who are around French Creek, and I know a lot of them are out traveling this weekend and getting that rest in before the work of school really kicks in. And Labor Day is always bittersweet for me. I enjoy it, I look forward to it, but it always kind of signals the end of summer, doesn't it? At least in my perspective. And so Labor Day, I get excited about it because I enjoy the time with family and friends and having another day off on Monday. And some of you are saying, don't preachers have 6 days off? The answer is no, we don't. I just put it out there because I know you well enough to know that some of you, if most of you weren't thinking it, some of you would have said it. So I enjoy it, but it's always bittersweet because it means that things are about to change. We don't always enjoy that change. We don't always enjoy the things that come next. But I was thinking about Labor Day, and what it typically means to me is a picnic and not working. And I thought, well, maybe I should just check it out and see if there's a little bit more to it. There really is a little bit more to it, and part of it is celebrating the labor of people around us. All the people who work hard around us and make things happen. There are a lot of things that we take for granted. A lot of people who work and labor so that we can enjoy life the way that we do. And this was created as a day to actually stop and say thank you. It's a pretty good thing to stop and say thank you. The other part of it, there was actually a thought of shortening the work week for a period so that everyone could relax and spend time with family. And I thought, how cool, I got half of it right. So as we labor, thank you. But also, let's stop and not forget that there is more than just the work that needs to be done. And so Labor Day really reminds us about two things: work and play. Work and play. And that's actually what we're talking about today. And I'm a firm believer that our work and our play, it reflects who we are. It reflects what's in our soul and how we do that. And over the years, I have worked with enough people and dealt with it myself that sometimes we don't feel good about playing. There are some people who don't feel good about playing because if I'm not being productive, then there's something wrong with me. On the other hand, some of us don't feel good about working. And yet what we find here is that work and play are both absolutely necessary. One truly helps us appreciate the other. And what I have found, especially with the kids coming along, is that I am much more diligent in my work time than I used to be. Now, some of you may not believe that, but I am much more diligent now, especially when I get the opportunity to get away and work, than I used to be, because I know that I've only got certain amounts of time to get everything done. On the flip side, I'm really trying to find good opportunities to play, both with my family and without them periodically. Okay? We all need a chance to recuperate. We need a chance to rest. We need a chance to grow and to work through everything that we're talking about. And so this opportunity of Labor Day reminds us that what we do working is important, and the way that we play is absolutely important. And I was starting to think, what can we do? There's a lot of different passages. But one of my favorites in this, because it's going to sum up all of life so much more, is 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And so let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. And I will tell you that the way that we typically read this passage, starting with verse 23, is we just kind of diminish it to the role of idol food. And most of us don't deal with idols. We don't deal with food that's been sacrificed to idols. So we often think that this passage really doesn't apply to us. But if we look at this, we see that there's a lot more here. So 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible, but not everything is constructive. Nobody should seek his own good, but the good of others. Eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. If some unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. But if anyone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it, both for the sake of the man who told you and for conscience sake. For the other man's conscience, I mean, not yours. For why should my freedom be judged by another's conscience? Well, if I take part in the meal with thankfulness, why am I denounced because of something I thank God for? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everybody in every way, for I am not seeking for my own good, but for the good of many, so that they may be saved. And 11:1, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Wait a minute, we're talking about work and play. We're not really talking about food sacrificed to idols. So why is this the passage that we would pick? Well, we picked this passage because what Paul is actually saying here is that this is more than just about food. The primary topic in this passage, the primary reason that we're looking at it, is that all of our actions, whether it is work or whether it is play, should be to glorify God. And we do that through seeking the benefits of others, not just ourselves. Well, if you start to think about it, that falls into work and play, that falls into life, that falls into everything that we do. Obviously, it covers the topic of the meat that we eat, the food that we have. But everything that we do is to glorify God. Now, we just talked about play as being time where we get away, where we relax, where we do things for ourselves. And we talked about work as the thing that we often have to do that benefits others. And yet here, we don't really get to take a vacation from thinking about others even when we play. What that means is we don't really get a day off from glorifying God. Now this is a challenge because sometimes we go to church on Sunday and we assume that if I do this hour, then the rest of the week is mine to do whatever I want to do with it. It's why the impression that pastors only work 1 hour a week. You know, hey, I put my time in, they put their time in, we're good. See you next Sunday. No. Paul says this isn't about just putting your time in. This isn't just about getting some things right. This is about everything that we are doing. Whether you were on the clock or off the clock, you are on the clock for God. Does that make sense? And so this passage of doing everything to glorify God. Now, what I love here from Paul is that he's responding to either complaints that had reached him or a letter that had reached him, and so he responds to some things in quotes. And one of the phrases that he responds to from the Corinthians is the statement, everything is permissible. And basically what scholars believe was going on here is they were writing and saying, Paul, some of us think that we should just be able to eat whatever we want to eat, and others are saying, no, you can't because this happened to it and that happened to it. But Paul, we think everything is permissible. Paul, we think and we really believe, or we know, because it was the Gnostics who they really believe was writing this stuff, that we know that everything that we can do is permissible. That all of this food is permissible to eat. And Paul writes back with perhaps one of my least favorite phrases. Yes, but. I don't want to say I hate the word but I strongly dislike it. Because when the word but occurs in a sentence or in an answer or even in a compliment, it tends to negate a lot of the stuff that came before it. So let's just throw out a couple compliments. I like your shirt, but you wear it all the time. Or you did a good job, but you missed that spot. Or you lost some weight, but you have a ways to go. I mean, think about that. There's a compliment given, but everything that came after but, didn't it just strike all that? That's exactly what happens here, and you better believe that those who wrote this letter, as they read Paul's response, they heard the but. And he says everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. Boy, that kind of strikes some things in there that we might do. Everything is permissible, but not everything is constructive. Well, I bet we have engaged in some constructive activities under the guise of work, and definitely under the guise of play. Well, it's what I want to do, and it's my time off. And I'm allowed to do it. It's not causing harm to anyone. Yes, but it doesn't mean it's productive. It doesn't mean that it builds anyone up. It doesn't mean that it is good for you or anyone around you. All of a sudden, play even has rules, doesn't it? According to Paul, as we do this stuff, everything that we do is to be beneficial, is to be constructive, and not just seeking what we want. Well, I talk about it often that one of the best things we can do is to remember that it's not all about me. It's something that Jen and I tell the kids all the time. It's not just about what you want. It's not what's about just you think you should happen. I'm tired of macaroni and cheese for dinner. We've only had it once. It's not that bad. But if it were up to the kiddos, we would have macaroni and cheese and hot dogs 7 nights a week. Yeah, I know. Luckily, I get to say, no, that's not beneficial for you. You need more nutrients than macaroni and cheese and hot dogs.
Like salad.
Like salad.
Yeah.
Salad's good.
Yeah.
Fish is good. Well, I'm working there. I really like fruit salad.
Fish sticks.
Fish sticks, working on that. So I love that we do this life together. Isn't that cool? And you guys know me well enough to know the areas that I'm still working to grow in. Because if we can't be honest about the ways in which we're growing, then we're probably not working on anything. And that's exactly what Paul is saying here. Okay, I understand that you have reached this spot, and you are right to point this out. But you also need to be aware that not everyone around you has reached it. And so if you do something that you believe is okay, but it is harmful to them, then it's not all right. This concept of no matter what I do, it's not just about me. I'm not the only one who is important. And so Paul's statements that not everything is beneficial, not everything is constructive, they're hard to hear, but they're important for us to remember. And the tension begins to build between what they sent to Paul and Paul's response. And I don't know about you guys, but I get tired of tension. Sometimes I really like things to just be easy. I really like it to not have to think. I know I'm not the only one that feels that way, because there are millions, if not billions, of TVs sold around the world. Opportunities to just disengage and to relax, to allow everything to become simple. And so Paul calls us to a place where he says, you need to be aware of the things that you are doing on a day-by-day, moment-by-moment basis, because there's big implications. In fact, as Paul goes a step further, he says, no one should be seeking their own good, but the good of others. You can be honest here. You don't have to raise your hand, but at least be honest with yourself. How many of you get tired of doing stuff for other people? You don't have to raise your hand. Don't we? You get tired of doing stuff, thinking about other people. And yet, Paul calls us to continue this about not just seeking what we need, but thinking about how it impacts everyone around it. And so Paul says, everything is permissible, but don't do it if it's going to hurt someone. Everything is permissible, but don't do it if it's going to tear stuff apart. And Paul really comes back and he hits them with this line that says, it's just not about what you think, but just what you want. And then in verse 31, Paul takes a little bit of section talking about food, but when we move down to verse 31, Paul recaps his message, and he says, here's the deal. Whatever you eat or drink, and we're just going to sub in there work or play, whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. See, most of us don't think about play as something that we can do to glorify God, but if you go back to the creation accounts, one of the things that we see is that after God created, God rested. And part of that play is the restorative rest that occurs. Now this is a challenge for those of us who like to go and run as we play, because we've talked about it before. Often we'll go on vacation where we play the whole time, and then we're exhausted. We played, we didn't rest. Part of play includes rest. Part of play includes connecting with others. Part of play, it includes making sure that those around us are getting a chance to play as well. I have really enjoyed getting back into fishing this part of summer. It's been a lot of fun. And I'm catching some big fish. Bigger fish than I've ever caught. You've got to understand that as I grew up, all I did was drown worms. Occasionally, I would pull a bluegill in about like that, and I was ecstatic because I had never had something that big fight on the end of my line before. And so now, as I'm getting the opportunity, a few weeks ago, 30-inch lake trout, I measured it, I am not exaggerating.
11 pounds.
11 pounds, Greg was there to verify, and if you don't believe him, you can trust Ray. Ray was there to verify. You know how fishermen are in their fish toys. And I had an opportunity to pull in a good 24-inch walleye. Awesome, awesome opportunities. But if every day that I'm off, I run away and don't spend time with my family, that's not healthy play, is it? No. And so if our play is just draining us and we're just running and we're not investing in others around us, then our play is a little out of balance. On the same hand, if I work 70, 80 hours a week and I don't spend time with my family, my work becomes out of balance because what I'm doing there may be good, but if it's harming those around me, then boy, that isn't beneficial. And my play may be fun and I may be really enjoying it, but if it's harming those around me, then it's not really constructive, is it? No, so this work and this play, it absolutely matters that we do it in a way that not only is good for us, but in a way that is good for others, and in a way that glorifies God. Does this make sense? And then if we do this, and it's a word for me that comes back, that is very obvious here, it's balance. It's a balance of work, a balance of play, a balance of personal quiet time, a balance of family time, and making all of this stuff fit as best as possible. If we do that, we actually get to the spot where our soul reflects pretty healthy. It reflects something really, really good. In fact, it reflects a place where God is at work. And isn't that what we are all looking for? Isn't that what we are all hoping for? We are looking for a way to be restored that changes us to the very core of our soul. And when we do this in concert with God, it absolutely does that. And it brings one more benefit. And Paul hits on it in verse 33. The reason he does all this stuff and he talks about doing it in a way that is constructive, a way that is beneficial, is because at the end of the day, everyone around us, we want to be saved. And not only do we want them to be saved, God wants them to be saved. And so as a Christian, if I work in a way that doesn't honor God, whether that is not working enough or working too much, boy, that really doesn't send a good message about God. And as a Christian, if I play in a way that is all about me and doesn't include anybody else, and I'm just always out there running, that doesn't send a very good message about God either, does it? Paul says, you guys are missing the point. You're worried about what you can stick in your bellies and what you can do. And I'm saying, you need to have an eternal focus as well. Because everything that you are doing as God's people sends a message to those around you. And we want to teach them healthy things. We want to teach them that you can eat anything as long as it is really glorifying God. We want to teach them that you can work and glorify God. We want to teach them that you can play and glorify God. So that in the end, everyone may be saved. Paul kind of reminds the Corinthians of something that they weren't expecting. We need a bigger perspective than us most days. It is so easy to get caught up on us. but we need a bigger perspective in life. And that if we aren't careful, we will get so focused on all of our earthly tasks and all of our earthly opportunities to play that we will completely forget about the eternal. Paul says, don't miss everything. Don't miss the big stuff. And then Paul adds one more level to it. He says, hey, this isn't just what I'm telling you. This isn't just what I think. This is how I live. But it's not based on what I think is right. It's based on what Christ showed me. And so in 11:1, he closes with, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Well, isn't that terrifying, boys? When you stand up and say, follow my example, follow what I'm doing, because it means that everyone's watching. It means that you are being held to a standard, that you have to do things in a way that not only match what you said, but really glorify God. And Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. Yeah, not a bad standard for work and play. I want to throw this out there, though. How many of you think of Jesus as one who played while he was here on earth?
Yeah.
Do you think of Jesus playing? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite books that I had the opportunity, that I was introduced to through college, was Dangerous Wonder by Giaconelli. And there is this chapter in there where Mike talks about Jesus kind of taking a bath in the lake with all of the disciples. And he said, I just really believe in all of my heart that at one point Jesus reached down, got a scoop of mud and chucked it at Peter. And that what turned into a bath time where everybody's kind of cleaning up actually became a little bit of a mud fight. We don't think about that kind of stuff with Jesus. We assume that Jesus is only worried about one thing, and that's acting churchy. I think that's a good way to say it. Most of us are pretty sure that Jesus was just about acting churchy. I don't think that's it at all. Jesus was all about living a real life with work, with play, with relationship, with drawing away in solitude, and then repeating and mixing it up. If you want to see a good, healthy balance, look at the life that Jesus lived. And even though the scriptures don't record a mud fight with Jesus and the disciples, I can see it happening. I can absolutely see a lot of jokes happening. I'm trying to just... I've gone too far. We often joke through college that Jesus was probably the best at pulling vigor. So, if you don't get that, that's okay. My kiddos Alex has figured that out and absolutely loves to do that now. At 4 years old, a little bit of boy humor there, so I apologize if you are offended. But it's part of life and living in relationship and doing this all together. So here's the deal. It's Labor Day weekend. Appreciate those who do things around that you can see. Appreciate those who give in ways that you don't see. And stop and say thank you. In the same way, take some time to play. Get some time by yourself, but get some time with other people. Invest in your family, and remember that everything that you do, whether it is work or play, is to be done for the glory of God. And if that is your standard, you will do both very well. Let's pray. Dear God, it is easy to get out of balance. It is easy to work too hard. It is easy to work too little. God, it is easy to be selfish as we play. God, keep us from doing it the way we would do it, and help us to do it in a way that honors you. God, we need your help in every single day. And God, may everything that happens in our life and in the life of everyone in this church and everyone around us, may it be done to glorify you and to ultimately bring every person in this world to know you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey,